Hello and welcome. I'm Jay.
And I'm Robbie.
You're joining us for episode 21 of Generations Apart, the podcast where we talk about gaming and technology from across the generations, sharing our perspectives on the past and our excitement for the future. On this episode, we're talking all about Apple's WWDC conference and specifically getting into the Apple Vision Pro headset. So at this point on our episode, we would normally talk about what has piqued our interest. However, there's just so much to unpack that we've decided to leave that for this week. And instead, we're splitting this episode into two parts. So if you're in this episode today, we're going to talk all about the Vision Pro headset and get all into the details and everything that Apple has launched or talked about launching for this headset. If you're not interested in the headset, then hop over to our other episode where we're going to deep dive everything else that Apple covered at their conference. Robbie, where do we even start with this? So we should probably say that we are back to our regular scheduled programming. We had a few pre-recorded episodes over the last few weeks while you enjoyed your honeymoon around the West Coast.
Yep.
And while you were there, so much happened, including Apple's WWDC conference. So when did you catch up and what did you make of the Vision Pro announcement?
Yeah, what a time to go on holiday. It's absolutely conference season now across all tech. So it's not just like Apple, but there's gaming, Xbox and PlayStation, and Meta did one as well. So yeah, what a time to be away where I can't keep up with it. But it was a fantastic time and well worth it. I might be a little bit jet lagged on this episode, just forewarning any fumbling or brain farts. But I did manage to. I was very excited about watching this Apple conference because I'd watched a bunch of the leaks leading up to it about what we're expecting to be released. And I knew it was going to be around 2 hours as well. It was going to be quite a long one. There was going to be a lot that's was spoken about. But I downloaded the YouTube. So I flew back on last Friday, which would have been the 9th. And so it was like 3 or 4 days after the conference itself. So I downloaded it for the flight on the way back. So I watched it all on the 10-hour flight back from Los Angeles to London. And it was amazing. It was really good. I had it on like 1.5 speed as well, just to get through it whilst I was on the flight. So I might have missed a few subtle things in there, but I caught all the cringy jokes, most importantly, and I caught
Always
the
cringy
one more thing at the end. The very what's his name? Columbo, is it? Is it Columbo that does that at the end of the?
I think it's Steve Jobs who kind of.
No, I know
from
Steve
an
Jobs
Apple
also
perspective.
but it's the
I don't think it's Lieutenant Columbo that they're taking off from there, but I know what you're on about.
I mean, who coined it first? Who knows? But yeah, I managed to catch that bit at the end as well, and yeah, saw the exciting update about the Vision Pro headset.
And they spent sort of circa 45 minutes, I think, talking about the headset. So there's an awful lot to kind of get into. And it's also worth fair saying we're not recording this in the moment. You've had time to digest. I've had time to digest and kind of see what the world has made of this. Generally, I don't know what your views are, but the reception seems to have been somewhere, I would say, fair to middling. There seems to be a lot of excitement for the tech and a lot of excitement for the headset, the usual memes that you expect from anything like this when people put something out that looks a little bit dorky. But the price is the thing I think that has been the most divisive, which we can get into later on. But would that be your kind of reflection? Is that what you've seen from him, kind of influencers and social media as you've been following it?
Yeah, I'd say it's been a broadly positive reception. There's been a few mixed things on some of them and a few Easter eggs actually that have been realized after the fact, after the conference itself. But yeah, I think it's been broadly positive, the reception, but the price is a hard pill to swallow, I think, with that one. But we were expecting it to be around $3,000, but it even exceeded, it even exceeded that, which only Apple could do, really. But
and that's before you buy any accessories, spare batteries, additional leads, extra head straps, whatever else you're going to be able to buy with this. It's starting at $3,499, which is a lot of money.
I was surprised as well that it's well, maybe I shouldn't have been surprised, but the release date as well was also surprising. It's coming out next year.
Yeah, my kind of summary at the end of it, and I'll sort of take you there first in case you want to turn off after this. But for me, so I wrote here, these are my literal words into my notes: mind blown by the Vision Pro. We can get into all of that. Disappointing that it's a year away. Cost was even more than rumoured, but I did put, when you take into account what's packed into this thing, I don't think it's entirely unreasonable when you bear in mind where it's coming from. And I've seen a few interesting articles this sort of last week or so that have talked about, perhaps as a consumer world, we've gotten a little bit too used to cheap technology, and some of this cutting edge tech, and there's a lot of cutting edge tech in this headset, simply isn't cheap. And it's got the logo that makes it more expensive. It's the ecosystem, it's the time, the effort, the innovation. You're paying for an awful lot, as well as all the service that will ultimately be wrapped around this. So, I am absolutely trying to justify it to myself. So if anyone listening,
without diving into it too
whatever,
much, just to challenge that point about the cost, I did watch a video by Dave 2D, and he mentioned that there was some leaks around the actual cost per device of around $1,600. And he also said that he was quite disappointed that they didn't, for the first year, go and sell it at a loss, because it would have helped a lot with adoption. I know they're going to make a lot of money on services and apps and things like that. So, yeah, mixed bag, I think.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see where they got that number from, though, because, Apple's not going to release it, so he's presumably cobbled that together based on the spec and
no,
what
I think
it might
it was
cost
leaked
to assemble it.
But I don't quote me on this, but I think in the video he said it was leaked, the actual pricing. But that is the app cost for the hardware, and not including things like R&D and other costs that are not included, because they would have been developing it for, it's been rumored for 4 or 5 years now, I think. So the R&D costs go back to then, and there's all the patents. I think they mentioned it in the conference.
5,000 patents. Over 5,000 they quoted.
Yeah,
I think I made a note of that. Over 5,000 patents.
So all that cost isn't included, but
the
hardware
and of course then there's the software and all that sort of stuff, isn't there, as well? That's obviously been developed to support it. So, well, let's get into it, shall we? So I've my kind of notes here were made in real time. So we'll recap it as we saw it, if that works for you.
Yep.
So I think they started the presentation by kind of swooping around the headset. My first notes here were that it sort of struck me and reminded me of the AirPods Pro Max. It had that kind of beveled metallic look. We had the digital chrome, and then they announced the name Apple Vision Pro. That was like one of the first things that we saw. They talked about it being a computer that blends real world and the digital world. They talked about spatial computing, which came up multiple times through the presentation. And the two things that I noticed as I watched along, and also have been commented on heavily since, is that they talked about spatial computing. They never once said the words virtual reality or VR, and they never mentioned the metaverse.
Yeah.
So they've specifically steered clear, I think, of words that are potentially tainted or associated with other headsets and other work in this space, to differentiate what this device is all about. And I think that is, again, where you look at the cost of this thing, it starts to make a little bit more sense. This isn't meant to be a gaming accessory. In fact, they didn't talk about games really at all throughout it.
They did a little bit briefly, but it was not VR games.
There's a small nod where they talked about using a game controller to play games, but they didn't really deep dive or showcase any gaming experiences. Whereas I think in contrast, Meta, a week or so before, had focused heavily on the games side of the Quest 3. That's just a different marketing tactic. But that spatial computing, this being an accessory that you use every day, in fact, it almost didn't target gamers. If you think about what they messaged, they talked about watching and consuming media. They talked about using it for work and FaceTime calls and interacting and sort of day-to-day. It's very much targeted at almost becoming the wearable equivalent of your iPhone, rather than trying to sort of compete with the gaming space or the gaming market, which I thought was quite interesting. The spatial computing was one of the keywords that came up multiple times. They talked about environments extending and transforming your space. So I really liked I know that they were showing it was all marketing videos, and I'd like to see for myself how good quality the pass-through cameras actually are. But of course, they showed you, for most of the presentation, users working in augmented reality rather than a virtual reality. So they were more often than not in their own space, perhaps with an element of that reality being blended out, which I really liked how that was done with the digital crown.
The digital crown, yeah, that was a cool little fader.
and just being able to sort of move in and out of VR, what I really liked. And I think what was quite interesting going into the conference was there was a lot of talk about peripherals and controllers. And the rumor going in was that Apple weren't going to have any. And there were a lot of developers saying, well, that's a mistake because, they're not going to be able to port all these VR games over easily because they all use controllers. And of course, they announced it had no controllers. And it's eye tracking, finger gestures to interact, and then Siri to type and engage. And from what I can tell from those who've had a chance to try it on, things like eye tracking seems to be really impressive.
Yeah.
You and I dabbled with that in the PSVR too, but this sounds next level. The gesture control, very simple. It seems like a very relaxed interface to utilize. There's no sort of like worrying about putting on extra controllers and syncing them up and, interacting in those unnatural ways. And I quite like that. I found this a more compelling use case for a headset like this than I had ever seen with the other VR headsets that we've dabbled with, because my primary interest in those, or the angle, has always been the games.
Yep.
Whereas this showed me a world where I could use this for lots of different types of computing or interactions or entertainment that didn't necessarily require a game. And then I'll pause for a second. Then the one thing I wanted to mention, which did tickle me and still does tickle me, is eyesight. And I think it's clever, but I think it's also going to make us all look a little bit derpy as we're wearing these headsets. So this is the outer display, which is showing a representation of your eyes to other people. And I think when I was watching it, I just assumed it was almost like a pass-through. It was just showing your eyes through the camera.
Yeah.
To the, not I knew it was a screen, so not that I thought it was glass, but I think I just assumed that the cameras were on inside and it was just showing what the inside cameras could see on the outside.
Yeah.
I realised quite late in the presentation when they started talking about the avatars that actually the eyes on that outside screen are not a camera representation of your eyes. They are the avatar representation of your eyes with your movements controlled by the eye tracking cameras inside.
Super creepy.
Yeah, thought that was quite odd. Very clever, I will say. And actually, it's one of those things that when you put a VR headset on, people being able to interact with you or knowing that someone is there, I always find that to be quite off-putting. It stops me from wanting to put the headset on when I know other people are kind of around in the house in case someone comes in. And one, I might feel like I look a bit stupid, but two, I'm also concerned that they could creep up on me and surprise me and scare me. Whereas the impression that this gave was that if you're in the headset, even if you are in fully immersed, so that haze that they showed coming across the eyes to show the outside world, that you're not aware of them, that actually as they get close enough, regardless of whether you're in VR or AR, it would bring that person into your view so you knew they were there.
Yeah.
So that kind of stopped people from being able to creep up on you in that creepy way. And I quite like that. So I'm going to pause there because I can just keep reading my notes otherwise. But what kind of what was your attention on at that point? What were you making of it at that point? How did the eyesight thing take to you?
Yeah. So, well, there was a lot in the very kind of beginning of the intro, and the Easter egg I mentioned. I don't know if you noticed, but it's almost shot for shot Ready Player One. It's the
reverse, isn't it? But it's the opposite way around the head. But I saw that.
Yeah.
I didn't notice it on the day. I'm not going to pretend I did, but I've seen the references on social that suggest it's almost too close to not be a nod.
Yes.
To that, which I liked. I'm a big fan of that movie, so yeah. I
haven't seen the movie. I haven't even read the book. Christina's read the book, but we need to watch the movie.
Better. You should read the book or listen to the book. But the movie's a good short term fix if you haven't got the time to sit and read the book. The book dives deeper into the world and the politics and the sort of changes that you might experience if that world became a thing. That sort of full virtual reality world that everyone lives in. The film sort of doesn't bother touching on that in quite the same way. It kind of goes more for the story arc around the Easter egg hunting and the battle for the Oasis.
Yeah.
But sorry, we're deviating, but it's well worth a read or a watch.
I will get around to it. Because the other thing that I think, and you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong about this, but Ready Player One kind of has an underlying warning about the isolation of VR as well, right?
It's not so much the isolation; it's more the detachment from the real world. So it's because it talks a lot about people becoming dependent on the Oasis, being happier in it than out, and
Yeah.
their lives in the Oasis being happier than the ones they're having to live in the
Okay.
slums, or it's kind of post-apocalyptic poorer world.
Yeah.
So one of the acts that the kids take when it's like a very ending kind of thing, when they eventually win, of course they do. They shut the Oasis, mandatory shut it on certain days, like a Tuesday and a Thursday or something.
Yeah.
Excuse me. But which would never happen, of course. Like, there's no way that would ever happen in the real
No.
world. If a multi-billion corporation went, we're going to just not open on Tuesdays, the world would go mad. But it's an interesting idea that they're kind of forcing people to step out of that virtual reality and reconnect in real life. So
Well, the reason I
the
mention it is that it's an interesting choice that they decided to do the kind of Ready Player One shot for shot, because I think one of the criticisms and another parallel that's been drawn from it is that this headset appears to be very focused on an individual rather than a shared experience with other people. And although you can see people in the room, it seems to be all about watching content by yourself and doing things by yourself without other people. So one of the things that they mentioned in there, which is another reason why they, I think, managed to justify the cost, is it removes the need for a home cinema, a surround sound speaker system, and a few other things I think they mentioned. But that only is effective if you're living by yourself, or if it's only for one person. Because as soon as you need to have those experiences shared between multiple people in the same household, then that cost is justifiable for multiple people. But I think that the overall theme just felt like it was more aimed at the individual and that individual experience. And with it being a very expensive headset, I don't think you can. I can't imagine many families buying the headset for every single person in the family, for example.
Yeah.
And at that point, it becomes not a shared experience.
When the iPhone first came out and it was 4 or 5 times the price of a normal mobile phone at the time, probably the idea of your entire family having iPhones or your entire family having an iMac. And I guess what's interesting, and this is just a counter argument to that, this is not me being defensive on the Apple front, because I completely agree, the price is prohibitive for a lot of people. They use the word Pro in that headset name, I think, specifically because at some point they intend to release cheaper versions.
Yes.
Much like they have with their phones. We've got the Pro phones, we have the normal phones, and then we have like the SE range, don't we, whatever they call that now, which is the cheaper version, the older tech, the cheaper version. As this iterates, and Logic says don't buy the first one. I'm probably going to buy it anyway. But Logic says don't buy the first one, because if you look back at Apple Watch, second iteration significantly improved on the first one, adding much of the things that were missing from the first. iPad 1 was the same. iPad 2 was a massive leap forward and became the standard for many years for the iPad. So the chances are this will change, and Vision Pro 2 will be the one that kind of moves the needle. But inevitably there'll be an Apple Vision SE or an Apple Vision Lite or an Apple, So I think there will be cheaper iterations. It's no different to the Meta Pro and the Quest Pro and the Quest. Okay, the price gap is, we're still talking significantly less than the Apple headset. But then that's like comparing Android with iPhone, isn't it? I know we've done that before, but
it's true.
The price point for these devices, when you buy Apple, you're buying at a premium. And I think that will come with the experience. It will be a premium experience, and it will come at that cost. So it won't be for everyone. It'll be for the rich or the foolish, and I'll fall into the second category, not the first.
Because I think
I'm still keen. The price is, it's not without pain. If I had to shell out for it in one go, I should probably spread it hopefully over a couple of years and not think too much about it. But if I had to cough up £3,500 straight off the bat, I would probably find that quite a difficult transaction to complete. It is a lot of money.
I do agree that they're quite good at that. I think Meta have a almost the opposite way around. They've started with the cheaper devices for mass market adoption, and then moved into the more expensive, more bespoke work pro style devices, which I guess might be a little bit harder to argue for their user base, their existing user base anyway. But Apple, and I think it's a traditional thing for Apple, is they've always started with the premium. And because, quite clever, you mentioned like the Pro phones and then the normal phones. Whatever is on the Pro phones, say 2 generations ago, will be on the normal phones in 2 years. And so I think it means that everyone can get excited about a product release, regardless of whether you're going to adopt it straight away or whether it's going to be in 2 years. And so I think you're right about this being a pro headset. Regardless of whether you're going to buy this version, you can still get excited about it, because when the features of this version comes out on a cheaper version in the future, you'll get to use it. So you can still be excited about that. What I still think is not, doesn't really, hasn't been addressed with that cost issue, is that even with everyone being able to buy these devices, there really wasn't a lot in their marketing material. In fact, I'm struggling to remember any marketing videos that they had that included multiple people using the devices together.
I think they were not together. No, I agree. I don't think there was anything apart from maybe FaceTime, although they used
Well, even that
one
was
person and the other people weren't in the
and
headset.
then one
It was
person
more
with
of
a
a.
headset. Yeah.
I think it was to show you that you could interact seamlessly with all your other FaceTime users. Though it was one of those, don't worry, you don't worry, all your friends don't have to have a headset to be able to use it with them. You can interact with people outside of this ecosystem as long as you're in the Apple world. FaceTime's going to work for you.
Yeah.
Because FaceTime's a huge part of a lot of people's communication systems. It's what they use to keep in touch with their families. So the idea, I guess, that you can use this as well. There was, I think, one shots where they talked or they showed people in a more productive work-like environment.
Yes.
I don't want to call it work because it didn't look like what I think about as work, but I sit at a desk all day.
Yeah.
But more in like these collaborative, creative spaces, and where multiple people were wearing headsets, but they weren't, as you say, they weren't kind of interacting together. It's a really good point. I mean, it didn't worry me too much. I must admit, I didn't really notice it. Perhaps that was because I wasn't looking for it. I thought the use cases were quite interesting. I don't think that much of the VR stuff that I've done with other people has been a particularly well-polished experience.
Yeah.
I've found a lot of the best experiences in VR still have been those sort of solo experiences.
Yeah. Which is interesting.
I'm really
because
interested.
It was actually Mark Zuckerberg who had that criticism that they're very different
What a
visions.
surprise.
I know. Funny that, isn't it?
You mean the rival?
Yeah, I know.
The rival's fancy headset.
I mean, I was expecting criticism, but his main angle was that they were for different purposes. Mark argues that Meta is more aimed towards that social vibe, whether it's through gaming or through the metaverse. Whereas he said that it seems to be more an individualistic experience with these headsets, which I guess is a fair comparison, a fair distinction between you might want to use them.
I think he made some sort of comment to it being a device you had to use sitting down as well, which wasn't entirely true. It just looked more comfortable sat down.
I don't think that's true neither, because as you say, that in that office environment, the guy was standing up.
No, there was a lot of times they were showing people wandering around. I think the difference is what they weren't showing was the sort of level of physicality that Meta have leaned into in the past.
Yeah.
You look at a lot of Meta's advertising, they use a lot, especially the Quest, they use a lot of fitness stuff. There's like boxing and there's like Beat Saber and there's like these adventures. It's very much about these immersive experiences, which aren't always, they're not always social. But I get what he's coming at. What we haven't seen, I guess, from Apple with the Vision Pro is what that ecosystem looks like for the social. Is there going to be a kind of Apple world where they just let other software developers create those? I think what's interesting with this, and perhaps more compelling, is that there is already an ecosystem of creators, devs out there now who can relatively easily bring their app experiences to this headset in a way that is perhaps more accessible than Meta. And users who are buying this are probably buying it for different reasons. I don't think you're going to go out and buy an Apple Vision Pro if you want to play Beat Saber. That was one of the jokes, wasn't it? There was a video of someone with Beat Saber blades coming out of their fingertips just doing that to play Beat Saber. For those who are
apparently it's coming to it. There's been some spicy tweets by the developer of Beat Saber.
Well, why wouldn't you? So there was a lot of stuff before the conference that said if you haven't got the peripherals, none of your devs are going to come to you. But if you think about the possible penetration that device is going to have, because it's Apple, it's not that's not going to. I'm not saying it's necessarily better or worse. We'll get into spec, but it's purely that brand. So Apple are rarely the first to do something, but they often do it in a way that is adopted more widely. I would argue often better, but that's me being a slight fanboy. But they often do. So the iPod wasn't the first MP3 player, but it was the most popular.
Yeah.
The iPhone wasn't the first smartphone, but it was most popular. the iPad wasn't the first tablet, but it's gone to be the most popular. So like they're good at making devices that people want. Now, whether that's marketing, tech, software, innovation, bit of everything. That's the difference here, isn't it? Is that they're going to have more mass market appeal, even with something as obscure as this, simply by virtue of the fact that, one, it's expensive. So if you're someone with a lot of money and you want to show you've got lots of money, buy one of these, stick it on a table. People know you've spent a lot of money on it because the price is, it's not going to have escaped even your non-enthusiasts. If you are into this sort of stuff and you like, really good, you're an Apple fanboy like me, you've got like all the Apple bits and pieces, this is going to accentuate that experience from the ecosystem. It's going to bring your devices together in a different way. You're going to get the benefit of that investment in the wider ecosystem.
Yeah.
And I think that's really interesting. I have seen some VR YouTubers that I follow saying that it's a difficult one for them because they're not in the Apple ecosystem. So it's a much bigger investment for them because they don't have all the other sort of tools that sit around it. I mean, the cost is the same for everyone, but they're not going to get as much out of that platform because they don't have the
ecosystem.
Their mobile's not on the same platform. Yeah, their computer's not on the same platform. One of the things I liked, when we're jumping ahead slightly, is when they showed the kind of virtual workspace you could have inside the Vision Pro, that spatial computing, but how that was augmented then by your MacBook or your Mac. By simply looking at it,
like that.
And it just brought that into the headset. Like, that's something that only Apple can do at the moment, and that's what I think differentiates this from, I mean, I've tried with the Meta Quest Pro multiple times to get the virtual desktop experience working, and I can make it work, but it's not a good one. It doesn't work. It's too difficult to interact with. I'd like to see whether Apple can change that. Maybe they can't. Yeah. Maybe when it comes out, it's just as bad.
Yeah.
Because we don't know, do we? Like, no one's gone hands-on with this. Not really. There's been a few people at the developer conference who've had limited time on it, but they won't have got.
And it's a pre-production module as well, so that there are things that they might change still.
We really don't know at this point how good or bad this is going to be. We're speculating, but what I can say confidently is that everything they showed was just incredibly impressive. Yeah. Not entirely original, but incredibly impressive the way it was executed or appears to be executed.
Yes.
So there's a lot still to prove.
There was another couple of things I noticed in the video as well, and this is more after the fact, after rewatching it a couple of times, or a couple of the clips at least. Is there was a clip where there was a dad playing with his children, I know where you want. I know where you're going with this. I'm not going to start on the criticism already of being, it's not very engaging with your children if you've got the headset on, you're taking videos of them anyway. But the bit I was going to mention was just
pure creepy, isn't it? Though, I mean, imagine
always watching,
dad peering over with his visor on, his artificial eyes, going, "Smile, kids."
I know, that is creepy.
It's a bit.
But
weird. It is a bit weird.
It was the kid kicking the football to him, and he was able, with the headset on, to have the coordination and the visibility to be able to see that football, catch it with his feet, and kick it back. Yeah. Which speaks, I think, a lot to
depth perception, haven't they, in the pass-through, which I don't think the Quest Pro has.
It's not just that. I think it's the quality of the lenses and the quality of the screens that they're using. I think it's something like 4 times the pixel per inch density to.
I don't know how it compares, but I got the stats so that they're micro OLED displays. 23 million pixels they quoted.
Yeah.
Which is more than a 4K TV for each eye.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is, I mean, and they said they're the size of a postage stamp, which is crazy.
It's insane.
And then there's a custom 3-lens solution to then make that, fit your vision. And I mean, it's great. I mean, so let's just rattle through some of the other tech bits then, because we'll end up debating around the fringes for ages. But so things like, I'll just rattle through some of the key things that I kind of took away from this. So they talked about being able to see the world clearly in Vision Pro. I'm really interested to see how that looks, because obviously everything we got was marketing video. It wasn't the real deal. But what I've heard from some of the influencers that, sharing content about this, that it is apparently very good. They're really impressed with it.
Yeah.
Virtual keyboard and hand gestures. People said that being able to talk or being able to use your eyes and your fingers just to type and tap. Apparently the eye tracking is next level. I think it's Marcus Brownlee said it was like magic, and he doesn't use that word lightly, which was really interesting.
I think the typing experience would be interesting though, because I think that's not a kind of an intuitive way of typing, is to just click and look at the letters. I don't think, right? I think you would be quicker if you had your actual fingers typing, multiple keys.
But I think they did show that. They did show a virtual keyboard with fingers.
Actually clicking the different keys.
They did show a virtual keyboard interacting with fingers
Yes,
interacting
I
with it.
saw the virtual keyboard, but my understanding of it was more that you would look at the letters and you would click.
Oh, no, they did show someone's hands at it. There's definitely
Oh.
a shot in that reel with someone typing. They didn't dwell on it. There was 100% a shot there, because my first thought was, how does that work? Like, where's the haptic? There's no haptics to tell you you've made a connection. So how do you know that you've kind of...
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, how do you know you've hit it? I think what's interesting is that the idea that you could look at a text box and just start talking and it would populate it.
That is very clever.
That's the sort of thing that maybe the idea, and again, you're not going to do that in a public space or sat on the train, but maybe if you're in your own room, you know, you sat at home on the sofa or whatever, you might be prepared and quite happy just to sit there and talk and fill those boxes in. Be interested to see how that works. It mentioned the 3D camera. I did put looks pretty goofy with the dad recording his kids, and I think a lot of people said the same. They were like, that made me cringe, and I'll be honest and say I think that 3D tech's going to have to come to iPhone or something in some way so that you can capture with something more natural and then play it back in the headset. I can't see many people walking around going smile and then taking a weird creepy 3D video or something. That's a bit of a strange one.
I agree.
It mentioned supporting 3D movies, which I really liked. I mean, 3D movies are a bit gimmicky these days, but maybe this could see the rebirth of 3D movies in virtual reality. And that
brings them to
I
life.
don't think that's unique either, though. I think that I'm pretty sure that's something that the Quest devices could already do.
Oh, really?
I might have that wrong. But that was good. I think it'd be nice, you know, it's extra level of immersion, isn't it? If you're watching, I think they used Avatar as the example. Looked pretty cool. And they also mentioned very briefly, as you rightly said, support for Apple Arcade games and controllers. So yes, there's no kind of controllers for everyday use, but if you want to sit and play a game in the headset, you can absolutely do that. And that'll be interesting, and we'll talk about it in our other episode. But when we're talking about Mac's possible route into the gaming space, which you predicted a few weeks back.
Yeah.
One of the things what did you make of the Disney bit when Bob Iger came on?
I think it's an interesting collaboration, and it's one of these things that only Apple could swing a deal like that with a collaboration as big as Disney bringing content specifically to this headset. I think it looks quite cool, like the few things that they displayed, like additional content that's around, say, a TV show like Mandalorian or a few of the films that they had. I thought that actually looked really, really cool, and the fact that they've developed stuff specifically for this headset around that, I think it could be quite a cool and immersive experience, just watching content in a completely different way. I really, really liked the Mandalorian one in particular. I liked because it gave you a few stats of saying like, you know, which planet they're at, and you know, what the date is in comparison to the rest of the Star Wars universe, and a few of the other stats that was just around the actual show that you're watching head on. I love that stuff. I think it's super nerdy, but that if you're really into the TV show or your film that you're watching through Disney, and it gives you that extra immersive experience, I think that's a really, really cool idea.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, did you also notice, and this is super geeky as well, that when they showed that particular clip, that the light from the TV show was reflecting into the false environment?
Yeah.
So it wasn't like, here's a background and here's the video. It put that video in that background, and it made the lights and the colours coming from the screen reflect in the environment that you were in. Yeah. Just to make it feel like you were really there. I thought that was just a really nice little touch.
Yeah. There was a couple of examples of that where one of the environments that you can be in was like a lake that's in front of you, and you're surrounded by greenery as well. When it panned out and made the film screen to like 100 feet, it was huge. It reflected the screen on the actual lake as well, so you're in this immersive experience.
So that sort of thing is such a small but clever and important touch, isn't it, to bringing that feeling that you're there to life. I thought some of the Disney bits were a bit gimmicky. Mickey jumping off the wall, and I thought the superhero power gauntlet thing was quite interesting, that kind of AR projecting things onto you. Interesting to see how that all plays out. I thought the sports events looked really compelling. I'm not into American sports specifically, but if that was to come to, say, the Premier League, I quite like the idea of being able to watch a football match and see, you know, like stats and replays and stuff just happening kind of around the environment, rather than just watching a static screen. I like that.
Well,
or even better than that, see like rolling scores from other games just kind of happening around you, and that was quite interesting.
Even better than that, Marquez Brownlee mentioned in his video the fact that you can get NBA courtside seats and you pay for tickets, and you can just be planted courtside and watching your favorite basketball game through your headset. You're just like there in the actual event, looking around as if you sat there. And that stuff.
It's clever, isn't it? Because they can sell them for less, but they can sell them many times because
many times.
You can, hundreds of people can be the same seat.
Yeah.
Really clever. That was really good. I like that. I think then they went into some of the tech a little bit. They talked about the single piece of glass, and also the fact that there's the screen that faces out, the eyesight screen, is also a curved screen, and apparently that was a big thing to achieve. So
wouldn't want to drop
R&Ds went into that, which was great. I thought that they talked about modular system for the headset. So, and then I don't know if you were aware of this, but there's with your Apple Watch, there's loads of kind of crazy expensive designer bands you can swap onto
ones.
and they run you hundreds of pounds. There was a website mock-up. I don't think it was real, and it was like a designer brand doing different headset straps, like to make it look smart and look the part. And again, that's something that you look at some of the current headsets. They look techy and cool, but they're a little bit plasticky. They're obviously, because they're designed to be cheap and sold relatively cheaply, they're not overly well produced. They don't look aesthetically pleasing. I like the idea that your Apple Vision Pro could have a leather strap and this, that, and the other. That's the sort of thing that does appeal to me. I do like buying accessories for my Apple devices that kind of give it a certain premium look. I almost always now religiously buy a new iPhone and then buy one of the Apple produced leather cases for it, because that's just the look that I like. That's become a thing. I could see myself, if the headset kind of was good and comfortable and took off, upgrading that strap or upgrading things on the headset to make it look unique to me and to reflect my personality. I do like that idea.
Interesting though, you mentioned the build materials. Although they are definitely premium, there's no doubt about that compared to the competitors. I've also heard that it makes it very, very heavy. And it's similar
it's heavier, isn't it? But did they say how much heavier? I suppose they've not quoted, have they? Apple haven't given any official weights, have they? So
yeah, well, if you think it's all metal and glass, with a bit of fiber on the back, whereas a lot of the other headsets is a lot less glass, but mostly plastic. So the weight impact I've heard is quite a lot. It's quite heavy.
Someone likened it to the AirPods Pro Max and the fact that they are visibly heavier than your standard sort of set of headphones, which, I mean, I'll be honest, that is a concern. Comfort with headsets is a problem. It'll be interesting to see how that strap on the back distributes the weight, because it's a relatively simple looking implementation. It's quite a chunky strap. It's way bigger than anything I've got on any of the headsets I've played with, in terms of like the thickness around the back of your head.
Yeah.
Obviously, because it's fabric, it's not as bulky as some of the plastic ones. That's going to have to do some serious work to distribute that weight, though, and to make it breathable and comfortable, because otherwise, like you said, it's like the AirPods Pro Max go on your head, and they sit kind of an even spacing. They don't like move your head unnaturally forward or backwards. They just apply downward pressure, whereas this is going to sit on the front of your face and pull down.
Yes.
And I've had, certainly with the Quest devices in the past, noticeable neck ache after about an hour of use, where you're like, oh God, my head's kind of like trying to keep my chin up. It's quite difficult. So
it's why the Meta Quest Pro,
genuine concern.
It's why they have the battery on the back, right? So they can balance the weight from the front at least a little bit.
Yeah. But you got to bear in mind there is no battery in the Apple headset.
No, and we'll get to that. But the other thing I wanted to mention is, and it's rumored, might not be true, but I've heard that there is supposed to be a strap that goes over the top, and it is supposed to be worn most of the time, if not all of the time. But they didn't include it in a lot of their marketing material. I think there's only one shot in the videos that they mentioned where you can actually see the strap that's going over the top. But I saw on Twitter, there's rumors going around that is supposed to be on all of the time. They just missed it out of their marketing material for fear of it, I don't know, looking ugly or something. That could just be Apple haters online. It might be an optional accessory if you wanted to balance the weight a bit more. But just throwing that out there as a potential rumor as well.
Yeah, I hadn't seen that. That's a fair comment. I personally, as a bald guy, it doesn't bother me in the slightest, but I can understand if you had a precious hairdo, that having extra things going around your head might not be appealable. But
true.
Yeah, it makes sense. Let's do battery then, because that's the next thing on my list, and you've just mentioned it. So I take it you didn't take kindly to the external battery. What were your thoughts?
I think it's a good idea. I think it's a really good idea. I think it's a good implementation of having a battery on there to try and reduce the weight. But I think it was out of necessity. I think the headset is so heavy that if they had the battery on there, it would be unwearable. But I still do actually quite like the implementation. To be completely remote and have enough battery still to use it, admittedly, only for 2 hours, which I guess is not ideal. I think it's a really good implementation. They could have made that battery bigger, is my only criticism. If you're going to pocket it, if you're going to have it separately, only 2 hours seems like a bit of a shame for a headset like that.
Yeah. So I'm going to take you back to the first comment we made, which was starting at 3499, because I suspect that's going to be an optional extra. You want double the battery life? You can buy a battery for £500 or whatever the price is. They'll absolutely offer that as a premium additional. You'll be able to buy multiple batteries. You'll be able to buy bigger batteries. That's absolutely something they're going to do. There's no way they're not doing it. Interestingly, I know everyone's bemoaned the 2 hours battery life. Worth pointing out that the Quest Pro will get you 2 hours, if you're lucky, before you have to charge it. And the only way you can charge it is by plugging a cable in. They're no different to the battery one. Yeah. I saw a few people say, oh, you've got to plug the battery in and be connected to power to be able to run it all day. But yeah, of course you do. Yeah. That's how electrics works. That's how electronics works. It's not going to recharge itself. But the Quest...
Also, you're running two 4K displays.
Yeah. The Quest Pro will do... And all the cameras on the outside that do all the tracking. But Quest Pro will do about 2 hours. The Quest headset does about 4 before you need a battery. So... And in fact, that might not even be right. I don't think that's even right. Then that's not a bad time. It's about the same as everything else. It's pretty standard. And I think the difference is...
but I'm shocked that Apple went for just about the same as everyone else. I mean, if you look at their...
But they haven't. They have out the box, but this is what I'm saying. It's going to be an upgrade thing, isn't it? If you look at the Quest out the box comes with the Quest 2. I don't know about Quest 3. Quest 2 out the box, £400, is a headset with an elasticated strap. That's it. If you want the extra, you want the Pro strap, that's another £100. If you want the Pro strap with the battery, it's a little bit more. And that puts another battery on the back. It's a bit more comfortable. It locks in and it doubles the battery life. They're optional extras to take your experience and your needs further. For most people, as you said, if it's a seated, singular experience, why would you not just plug it in?
Yeah.
I personally don't know why they need to be absolutely wire free to enjoy it. But
I agree with that. Because I think, my VR headset has to be tethered to the PC. So I'm not, upset at the fact that it's 2 hours. But I will say that for something that's intended to be, they pushed a lot about content watching, and 2 hours barely gets you through a film these days.
But again, I think that I completely agree. I completely agree with that. There's no argument with that. I just think it's an odd thing for them to get battered over when it's no different to any other consumer electronics out there at the moment.
True.
That are comparable. Battery is an issue for everyone and everything, whether it's your electric car, your mobile phone, your laptop, or now a headset. Everyone wants more battery life, but they don't want anything to be bigger or bulkier or heavier. It is a compromise. I actually don't know that I like the idea of carrying the battery around.
Really?
So, I don't. I think it's, like you said, necessary evil. I think it's clever to detach it. I think the idea that you could have more than one is quite clever. So, if you've got a use case for it where you need to be kind of on it and relatively mobile all the time, so let's say you work in one of those art studios that they kind of gave an example of, I think actually being able to just maybe having a second one that's on charge, detach it, charge the new one, work on the second one, a bit like you might do a camera battery or, whatever, a gadget battery that's detachable. It's nice that you can detach it because most Apple gadgets don't allow you to touch the battery. So it's novel in a way that you can swap it out. But I think it's absolutely there so they can sell you bigger ones and bulkier ones. And if I don't think I'd have any issue with sitting down and being tethered to a mains. Like if I'm on, one of the examples I really liked was on the aeroplane.
Yeah.
Being able to put on your Apple AirPod Pros and sort of drown the sound out and then just immerse yourself.
Yeah.
What a great experience. Just blur that whole thing out. If you're a regular traveller, that's going to be great. More 100%. Often than not, there's a USB connector somewhere around or a power socket on most modern planes.
I did wonder whether...
Maybe not Ryanair, but
Yeah. Well, I did wonder whether you could plug in a portable power bank. Something that could at least output something, I'm assuming 65 watts, that's going to be needed for something like that.
Yeah, it'd be interesting, won't it? Because I think Apple will probably come in for some fair stick for the fact that it's a proprietary connector, which will no doubt make
Oh,
it
for the
harder
headset, definitely. But it's Type C into the battery pack, isn't it?
Yeah, so you want to put a battery pack into a battery pack.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, you probably can. I'm sure that'll probably be feasible.
Well, because the other thing I was thinking is that if, say, in your
Can you
scenario
imagine
where
that,
you've got,
carrying that around?
I know. Well, you could have it in your backpack.
One battery
at
in one
least.
pocket with a cable going around your back into your other pocket where the other battery is, and then up to your headset. You'd have very warm legs when that starts getting going.
Absolutely. But I did wonder though, because you mentioned having two batteries. What happens if you're in the middle of a film or something and you detach the only source of power to replace it with a different battery?
That's true. Yeah, that's a good point. It's probably going to go off.
Yeah.
Mm. Well, we can't answer that.
No.
Not for 6 or so months anyway. Let's do audio then, while we're on kind of the entertainment experience. So spatial audio.
Should I
directed
crack out the
into
guitar
your
like
ears.
Craig did on the air?
Did you see did you see him do it live to prove he can do it?
No.
Yeah, that was him.
No. To be fair, I said to Christina, because I said, it actually does look like he's playing it.
There's footage of him afterwards at a kind of a more of a question answer session where he comes out and does it live on the guitar. Look at it.
No way.
100%. I thought, yeah, right. When I watched the video and then that came out and I went, fair play, respect. So a couple of notes I made on spatial audio. It's directed into your ears without covering them, which I quite like. So a bit like the Quest Pro does something similar. I've got a pair of sunglasses that do something similar. It's kind of directed into your ears rather than covering them. You can, of course, pair it with any of your Apple headphones, which is great. That's kind of the ecosystem value. I like the fact that it analyzes your room and matches the sound to your room. So that's a feature from the HomePods.
Yeah.
That detect the bounce, the sort of walls and the positioning in your room to theoretically create that sort of equal sound. Now, to me, as an uneducated tech nerd, that just sounds cool. And I'm like, yeah, great, it matches my room. You look slightly like you don't trust that, or you have a comment on that, and you're the audio guy. So, what did you make of it?
Yeah, my experience with that stuff is that it's not hugely reliable, and the average consumer isn't going to be able to tell the difference anyway. No. So I think it probably is. They probably do what they say they do, and it's probably more reliable than the HomePod because it uses the LiDAR sensors instead of just sounds bouncing out the room, so they can actually tell the actual position of the room and account for any bass frequencies that might be lost or anything, and then boost things here and there and mess with the EQ. But I can't imagine it's going to be that much. I mean, I could be wrong, but I can't imagine it's going to be a huge difference to the default output of the audio. What I did have in my notes though is that I bet the audio is incredibly good. Apple are fantastic at audio. Their iPads and their MacBooks are like industry standard to beat in terms of portable speaker systems like that. So I genuinely think that the audio is going to be incredible, and the spatial audio in particular in the 3D environment is just going to be insane. So I actually am quite excited about that.
So let's talk about the chips that are in this thing. So they talked about the Apple Silicon, dual chip design with my notes, the M2 chip, which keeps it silent and cool, and then the R1 chip, which is the unique chip, which runs, which is the real-time sensor processing. So that's dealing with, and this is again my notes, so apologies if these are incorrect, 12 cameras, 5 sensors, and 6 microphones.
Yeah.
Which are latency free, because latency latency motion issues, and this almost removes any noticeable lag.
Yeah.
Which I have to say I'm excited about, and I will want to try one of these before I commit to buying it, because I have, even with the latest PSVR 2 headset, I find that it doesn't take a lot to set me off from a motion perspective, and to make me feel a bit uncomfortable. I do not want to spend £3,500 to put it on and then only be able to wear it for half an hour without getting a headache or a sweat on. So that's a concern for me. I'm hoping that that's not just marketing speak, and that they've genuinely found a way to beat that, because that is my biggest issue with being in these headsets. I find it quite disorientating. But what did you make of that? I know you love the Apple chipset, so
yeah,
excite you? Were you pleased with that, or
blew my mind? More? They put an M2 chip in something that's going to be on your face. That's wild. I know M2 is in the iPads now. It's in my iPad, in fact. But it's a computer chip. It's an actual computer chip. And when I saw that, I was like, okay, so that they're seeing this not as an extension to your phone or an extension to any device. It is a standalone device. Having an M2 there,
Yeah.
I think, is a real serious commitment to what they're trying to build with this. And that actually surprised me more than anything, is that it's not, it is a standalone device and they're going to be building like an ecosystem around this. I think I saw a few commentary about it, that it might be eventually a replacement for your phone at all, if they could shrink down the headset enough.
Yeah.
So I think it's a big commitment for Apple to have that powerful a chip in there. And then the second chip, as you mentioned, the R1, I think that accounts for the magic that Marcus Brownlee mentioned. The responsiveness of looking around, the ability to render the environment so quickly and handle all the changes so quickly. The fact that they went for such a powerful implementation, it really surprised me. I thought they were going to do something like something that might be in iPhones, like because the Meta Quest, for example, has I think it's a Snapdragon, so it's a mobile phone chip.
Snapdragon mobile chips, isn't it? Yeah.
I was expecting that. I wasn't expecting anything powerful or standalone, so that really did surprise me.
Well, that brings us back to what you said right at the beginning, wasn't it? Is that they started this whole thing, and they mentioned it several times throughout, which is they call this spatial computing. They don't talk about virtual reality. They didn't talk about the metaverse. It's about spatial computing. This is the next way that you'll interact with the computers.
Yeah.
And that's what they're selling this as. And I saw people mention that, before iPhone was the iPhone, we didn't have real proper mobile computing.
Yeah.
And that iPhone kind of changed everything in terms of the way we now think about, portable power and portable computing. Is this going to make the same, ultimately kick off a change that will see other companies come with their own devices in the future? There'll be a Samsung equivalent and all that good stuff. But are we moving away from this idea that these headsets are for gaming and virtual reality and these kind of like, faked almost experiences, to a world where actually this is more about augmenting your world around you, giving you seamless access to computers? I mean, if you think about it, if it's as easy to interact with as they say it is, look at something and talk, that removes the barriers for an awful lot of people who even an iPhone or an iPad is a struggle for. There are generations of people that just don't engage with this technology because there's too many barriers to entry. Well, actually, if you could pop someone into one of these headsets and say, just look at the thing you want and talk, that, or use your fingers, just pinch things, click, that could be quite compelling. I'm sure there'll be a barrier and a learning curve and everything else, but it's starting to make that more accessible, isn't it? And make the sort of this world that Apple can provide more compelling.
It's true. And to draw the comparison again between Meta, they've gone for warming people up based on gaming, and Apple have gone full in with this is nothing to do with, well, not just gaming. This is a standalone, completely separate device. And it's gone headfirst into this is an ecosystem, a computer that we want to build for the long term. This isn't a gimmick that's going to be an add-on to, an additional gaming system. This isn't a social platform where you can interact with other people in headsets. This is a different way of computing. So I do agree that they've it's quite a bold step, I think.
I also saw, and the last thing I wanted to touch on, well, a couple of things left, but one was the techniques to create the 3D map of your face and that digital persona. I saw a lot of people knocking it, going, "Oh, Meta have done it with this, and it's a lot cheaper. And have you seen this thing?" And then a lot of people turned around and said, "Well, no, this avatar is created on device using the cameras and everything else that the headset has available and the onboard processing. And this video that everyone's comparing it to is R&D, uses multiple high-quality cameras and huge amounts of processing power to create. There's a difference." I didn't think that the avatar was amazing.
No.
And probably because we've seen things like, is it MetaHuman from Unreal Engine?
Yeah.
That's incredible. But it's different technology. It's for a different purpose. I thought it was pretty convincing. And from what I'm told, if you're wearing a headset and you're looking at someone else's headset-driven avatar, they're actually very 3D and quite realistic looking, whereas perhaps they don't come across quite as well on a flat screen.
On the FaceTime call demo, I don't think it looked great. But I can imagine for the outside of the headset, that looks quite convincing because it's.
But I also don't think that. I mean, I'm sure some people get them will use it for a FaceTime call, but I would have thought more often than not, you're probably going to take it off and just use your phone. Or you
they
might
talked a lot about the FaceTime capabilities.
They did. I mean, they did. They definitely dwelled on it. They made their point. It does it. It's there, but I don't think that. I think if you've got the full shebang and you've got the phone, the iPad, the MacBook, you're probably going to take it off and use one of those.
Yeah,
just from
true.
a pure comfort point of view. But maybe if you're with a friend, like if you had one and I had one, I might be inclined to do a FaceTime call with your avatar just for the novelty value. But I think I'm probably more likely to take it off and just use one of my other Apple devices to talk to you. But I think it was very clever. It was nice to see it, and actually it gives you a bit of a hint as to where some of that sort of digital representation of yourself in that world could go, and how that could be portrayed in other experiences.
Yeah,
because they're giving access, aren't they, to a lot of the elements of the operating system to developers to develop solutions over the next 6 or 8 months. And I think that's what's going to be interesting. The launch date was disappointing, but I think it was for a reason, and it gives these developers now time to request the headsets, get hands-on, start developing and playing with these tools. So by the time it hits the market, it doesn't find itself in a position that a lot of these headsets have previously, which is they're under-supported. There's not enough software. There's nothing there to use. It looks like a lot of the apps you've already got could potentially extend into that virtual world and become accessible. They talked about all of the Microsoft suite being ready at launch. So, if you're compelled to sit and do Excel spreadsheets in your Vision Pro, you can, but that comes back to spatial computing, doesn't it? Yeah, like, you can very naturally kind of lay these displays out in sort of the augmented world, and then, you can work on them. I thought that was quite an interesting argument, but last thing I got here, and anything else you wanted to cover then really was the privacy and security. So I like the fact that we've got optic ID, which uses your iris to unlock the headset. So much now we've seen fingerprints and face ID. This uses your optic ID to unlock. So and again, they talked multiple times, didn't they, throughout the presentation, but during the Vision Pro one specifically, about security, encryption, privacy. It's such a big thing that Apple have built their brand around, that they made sure to make sure that you knew this headset was going to be treated exactly the same way.
It's a fear I never even thought of until they brought it up. But the fact that they could, record and share details about your eyes and where they're tracked to when you're watching things, and any of that data, I think is just a really creepy thing for them to track. So I didn't really think about it until they mentioned it, but I'm really glad that doesn't.
Imagine the combination of eye tracking and your watch telling you how your heart rate's going. If you're watching something particularly exciting, they can tell what you're looking at.
Well, I don't know what you get up to on your
what's getting you excited in your headset, and the actual effect it's having on your blood pressure. Could be quite interesting.
Exactly.
So I think we've unpacked pretty much everything that the presentation had to offer. I am mindful of not going too long on the episode, as we often do. We probably already have. You're nodding along because you can see the timer.
We're about up to the hour now.
Okay, well we'll wrap it up there. I think we'll try and keep it as close to an hour as possible. I guess my last question for you, Robbie, is: will you be buying one, or will you just play with mine?
I'll 100% play with yours, but I don't think I'm going to buy one. Absolutely not. No. It's far too expensive. And although it looks very exciting, I think I'm going to be one of those who waits until the normal version, not the Pro version, comes out, and I can still enjoy the features and a lot of the apps and ecosystem that's been built out since its launch. There's one other thing I was going to mention. I didn't get to give my take on the outside screen.
Sorry, go for it. Yeah.
And it was just to say, and it was again another thing I saw Dave 2D mention in his YouTube video, is that it's definitely for the look, and it's an iconic thing that you can say that's what that headset is. I'm not sure it has that much application, because they have aimed it a lot to individuals, in accessing content and watching content and things with the headset. It's weird for them to develop a feature for people that are in the room and haven't bought the headset. And I actually don't think it's going to get used much. And it doesn't benefit the user that much. It benefits everyone else, not the user. And Dave 2D made a good point there. That's probably $300 or $400 that's been spent on that on the device to make that screen and the glass around it. That could have been saved and could potentially have captured more people if they made it, say, $3,000 instead of $3,500. It could all of a sudden have been prohibitively expensive with that extra $500, whereas it might have been still quite an expensive device, but easier to swallow if it was $500 cheaper, save for the fact that you don't have the screen outside. It's the last thing I want to mention.
And that's an absolutely fair take. I wouldn't be surprised to see that drop in quality or removed altogether from the lower end headsets that will probably follow in the future.
Yeah.
I am interested to see how it takes off, because I think it is one of those things that you say, why would you need that? Like, in fact, arguably in things like the Quest Pro, eye tracking and facial tracking offers no benefit to the user for whom it's consuming additional battery power. It's all about improving the avatar experience for the people interacting with you in virtual reality. I think it's an interesting one. I think if you're going to use it more in an augmented reality way, perhaps there is some value to people being able to tell when you're looking at them and when you're not. So if you're in a public place and you've got this on and you're having a sneaky look at someone that you shouldn't be looking at or doing something you shouldn't be doing, then at least they can tell. Whereas, in a headset that didn't show your eyes, it could be quite unnerving. It's a bit like someone wearing a pair of dark sunglasses and you don't quite know what they're looking at, whether they're looking at you or reading a sign on the wall on the tube or something. I don't know, there's potentially something in there.
That's a much more sinister thing than I was thinking, but fair point.
Well, who knows? But I think that they're also just being able to see when you're approaching someone in a headset, whether they're aware of you or not, is quite useful if you do want to use this in more public places. I wouldn't dream of walking into a coffee shop and putting on my Quest Pro and just getting on with some
time.
Like, I know that's what they wanted us to do, but I wouldn't do it because the experience just, you look ridiculous. It isn't great. The tech's not up to it for a start. That's part of the problem. I'm not saying that I'll do that with the Apple headset either. I'm sure there's a whole load of self-conscious issues there to overcome. But if you did, at least they would know when you could see them and vice versa. It makes engagement with that person a little easier. If, those lenses are blurred over and that person has no idea you're there, then, maybe you don't engage them. If they've got their eyes up and they're doing something and they can see you coming, maybe, you start a conversation, you have a chat. I don't know. It'll be interesting. It's one of those things that none of us probably thought we needed. So it's now a case of, well, okay, show me why I need it. What does this do to enhance the experience? In a year or two's time, we might be saying, as a meta release, a lower end headset or something, why haven't you got, eyesight? You ought to have something like it. Or we might just be laughing at Apple for continuing to waste money sticking OLED screens on the outside of a headset. So
maybe.
Who knows? Well, I hope you found that as interesting as we did. Robbie and I haven't had a proper chance to really get into the Vision Pro, so this is the first time we've had a chance to debate it, and it was interesting to get your opinions. Not 100% sure I'm going to try and buy one yet. There's a long way to go, lots more to find out. If you were to put me on the spot right now, I would probably pre-order one, or want to. There's a lot of money, so whether I can afford to do it's another matter, but I'd want to pre-order one. Hopefully that's still the same in 8-9 months and I'm still as excited. I am a little worried that it's not coming to the UK on launch. They did say it was going US first, then other territories, so who knows how long we've got to wait. But we'll see. Lots to look forward to. If you are interested in the rest of the stuff that Apple showed at the WWDC, then please hop over to our dual episode release, which is covering all of that and none of the Vision Pro. But we hope you found that interesting. Please do all the usual things, like and subscribe wherever you're watching this content. It really does help us out. Let us know what you thought if you're watching on YouTube down below. What did you like about the Vision Pro? What did you think looked a little bit silly? And would you be looking to order one? We're interested to find out. Otherwise, we will see you on our next episode. Thanks for dropping by.